One of the vice presidents of the NTCA, and you'll also get to hear me more tomorrow morning at our Hall of Fame breakfast. This afternoon what we want to do is talk shot put. I think we have a couple people up here who kind of know what they're talking about when it comes to it. We'll start on this end, of course, with Reese Hoffa, the current world champion. Next to him, Connie Price-Smith, probably one of the best, if not the best, combination women shot discus throwers in history. Next to her, he was the world indoor record holder, and if you were someone of my vintage, you grew up with basic 70-foot shot putting, Al Feuerbach. Next to him, tying it all together and going back to 1948, he was the 1948 Olympic gold medalist out of Southern Cal, Wilbur Moose Thompson. And of course, the guy on the far end needs really no introduction, so I'm not going to give him one. No, it's we affectionately call him, I won't say what we call him, the first man to throw 75 feet and really revolutionize the sport for the second time with the spin, Ryan Oldfield. So that's our panel. What we're going to do is, this is basically a freewheeling discussion. What questions do you have? I know I've got lots of questions, but I've already talked them to death, so they don't want to hear me anymore. In regard to shot putting, training, diet, I had a great conversation this morning with Al Feuerbach in regard to how he got started. And Al was telling me a great deal about his, he didn't have the availability of a nutritionist or of a strength coach or the amount of sports science that we do today. And I said, well, how'd you really, what did you do? And he said he read. He started out just by reading and doing his own research when he was 13 and got out there and started doing his own research about nutrition. And he always tried to hold to that pattern, not that he always succeeded. We won't get into that. But, what are the questions that you might have for any of these people up here? Sir.
I have a question for Al. Did you ever try spinning? I know that kind of Brian came along and you were kind of in that era before people did, but just looking at your body and stuff, it looks like, you threw so far with the glide, whereas now everyone says, this guy who's 6'1" and 260 pounds, you'd definitely be a spinner. Did you ever try it?
Well, I did try it, but it was at the very end of my career, and it was the year 1984, the year I retired. And I was throwing over 65 feet in training, but that was a time in my career when my mind still said go, and my body was saying no. Because I started tearing muscles for the first time, started getting injured. First a calf pull, and then a pec, and then when I felt my rib cage or intercostal starting to go, I retired 1 month before the Olympic trials in '84. But I was experimenting with the spin at that point. And but one quick comment: the limitations are in the mind. I think I could have thrown farther with the glide if I had to, also. But yeah, the spin was definitely on my mind at that time. But my body was finished.
Next question. Great question, too. Next question. Sir.
Hi. We had a couple different speakers, including myself this weekend, that talked about the different styles of glide. And I thought maybe Connie and Al could talk a little bit about, like we talked about turn versus lift and lift versus turn in the middle. And, everyone watched Al's video growing up in our eras. And they had a little different technique that was used with the European model. I was just wondering what Al was trying to do with his right foot, what he's trying to do in the middle, and the same with Connie.
Sure. So if we can talk a little bit about the differences in glide styles, the European versus whatever, and Al?
Yeah, well, I think that they're both valid techniques, and I would never advocate my technique for everyone, because I know everyone can't turn their right foot to 90 degrees easily, and it's not proper for a lot of people. Also, I think the European style you're talking about, more of a lift, I don't know how to describe it, but I know exactly what technique you're talking about. Someone who's slightly taller than myself, it definitely would be a more appropriate technique. I think a shorter thrower like myself with the glide, I think there's a lot to be said for that pre-torqued power position, getting the lower body open, shoulders back, that wrapped position, and not lifting up and over. for a fast, to create a faster delivery. But I guess what I'm really saying is that I think both techniques are very valid, depending on the individual, and probably has a little something to do with height and leverage.
For me, I didn't try to pre-rotate it. I tried to land at about, probably with my right foot at about 11 o'clock, and I would try to rotate and lift at the same time.
I'll take it back a little bit further. When we were not gliders, we were hoppers. We wore spikes and threw off a dirt circle. And the first change I saw was from Jim Fuchs, who had a very high extended left leg and landed first to his right and threw over the top, more like a European style. And he was the first one I saw that made a radical change on that approach.
Brian, you're Brian. Prior to your, I've seen video of you from, I think it was 1972. Prior to when you became a spinner, you started out as a glider, but your technique out of the back was unique compared to your contemporaries. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I hope you can hear me, because I wasted my voice yesterday, but I just took a pill to shrink my vocal cords back down to normal. But I'm trying to buy a vowel and I can't. I rose up by my toe and came down and hopped and turned my foot all at the same time. Unlike Al, who went off the heel and then went to the toe. I never read a book on it. I just did that old country style yeehaw. But they go back over the films in '72. My technique wasn't that bad. It had more to do with my 401 bench press and my 365 power clean. I was just not strong as the rest of the boys. But the technique, you never do it the same way twice. So you can come close. You can build a good, strong concept that we're all looking for, so that when we put the pedal to the metal, that we can do it. But there's three things that are consistent. It's the speed of release, the height of release, and the angle of release, and that's all about the same. And everybody's a little bit different in their signature and their learning. And most people, like Al said, he would have done better as a glider. That's his comfort zone. That's his imprint. And old dog, new tricks kind of thing.
Yeah, I was looking for that backhanded compliment.
You want to rebut anything?
Well, I would like to make a comment on Brian's glide technique. That what I thought was so fantastic about it was his. It was unorthodox, just as was his spin technique. But Brian always had the ability to feel himself, putting himself into a position to get his body and mind into the shot, and you could see it.
I was a finisher.
He was a finisher, and to be a finisher, you have to know how to get into a position to be able to finish. You can't be in a position where there's nothing left to throw with. And Brian, he was just like the best at doing that, almost in an unorthodox sort of way, just a body feel.
Okay, from Moose Thompson, a question on what, if any, weightlifting was part of his training?
I had a coach to whom weightlifting was the greatest evil in the world. You were going to get muscle bound. And most coaches in football and track and field in those days said, if you want to get some strength training, go out and get a construction crew and they'll pay you for it.
Freshman to sophomore year in college, I got a construction job, and I was taking these 10-inch blocks, and I was off the truck, and I was throwing them, and I put them right in the sand, and they dropped them in the thing. And I just kept doing that and putting joists up and carpenter's assistants, and I went from a 55-foot foul to a 59-foot foul in a couple of months just working construction. So, and I got paid.
A job I had, I got an extra hour's pay, 45 cents for handling 40,000 pounds of sugar in sacks.
Al, let's talk about the progression then, because you and Brian roughly the same time frame. How was weight training different for you than it would have been for Moose, and then we'll work on over to Connie and Reese?
Well, we had the early stages in the 70s of systematic training, systematic weight training. You do more sets and reps in the off season. You pyramid to less reps, heavier weights as you get near the more important part of your season. And so it was very basic and rudimentary, and but we had some really smart people around San Jose that were really into into weightlifting training, as well as Olympic-style weightlifting, and some of those guys, Richard Marks in particular, wrote programs for a lot of us, and that seemed to be very effective. We also came up with a concept in San Jose because we were so passionate about what we did that we just had to have a breakthrough day. Sometimes we'd have these breakthrough days once a week, which is probably a little too often, but these would be both in throwing on Fridays and weightlifting on Saturdays. So I would say that things are much more scientific. There's a lot more research nowadays. I work as a sound recordist. I do a lot of, I've been in most of the NFL team weightlifting rooms, and it's unbelievable. They have every single thing you could ever imagine. They have strength coaches who are very smart and know how to write individual programs for each position and each person. And but I still contend that the right person with the right amount of passion could do it all with one barbell, maybe one rack and a little wooden shed somewhere. So.
The one barbell and the little wooden shack. Probably when I was throwing my best, I lifted in my garage. So,
there you go.
with just my weights that I had. But weightlifting was a big part. I probably would lift during the off season, maybe 3 days in a row, and then during season I'd lift one heavy day and one light day throughout my career.
Reese, how was it for you?
I guess it's a little bit of both. I try to lift reasonably heavy, but not really heavy, throughout the entire year. I don't do lifts on the off season. I think you do so much lifting throughout a season. If you take a month off from lifting, I don't think it's going to hurt you all that much. And I think it also helps me recover, because I know, during the season, if I take that 1 week off and I try to come back and I have to lift, it hinders me coming back, I guess, in a way. So throughout the season, I really never take that much time off in terms of a week. I'm always doing some kind of lift from, November till September until when I stop. And then I take everything off when I'm done. And so in terms of lifting, I mean, I guess in a way I lift all the time. I don't lift a lot of weight all the time, but I do try to do some kind of lift. So in a way, I'm always building some kind of strength and some kind of power.
Question for the retirees. What do you miss the most, the competition or the preparation, the training?
For me, it's definitely the competition. I don't miss the training hardly at all.
We don't. When we take a nap, we don't fall asleep and dream about training.
Well, wait a minute. and for me, it's definitely the training, and not the competition. For me, the whole joy of shot putting was the training for and the striving for. And I remember I had a great success my freshman year in college. I won the NAIA National Championships with a lifetime record 56 feet 2.5. And I was standing on the victory stand in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I said, "Is this it?" It was not as exciting to me to be up on the victory stand as it was to be striving each day. And so I missed the training.
Only the competition, and not even that. When I finished up in the Olympics, that was it. It had been a long, hard grind for me, and I was trying to get a career started, and I already had a first child, and so I'd had enough.
I only lifted because it was a means to an end. I loved throwing, and competition was a little bit more exciting in the recognition. I had a little problem with the lifting and stuff like that because I did try to get into it and follow examples. Feuerbach led the way. He showed a lot of stuff about Olympic lifting. I hadn't been that into it. I had been a power lifter, and Olympic lifting was the kind of stuff, if you get in trouble, you can just like dump it and not get caught under it, or trust someone to lift it off of you. But there's a thing that you have to do, is you have to load your lifting so that you don't get all your best stuff on Mondays and Thursdays, but you got to have something left for the meet. The part of the week that you have to throw is on the weekends, or the Friday or Saturday. And to throw better, let's say like with Al, to throw better on a Saturday night than you did on a Friday night, that takes a lot of guts, and that was one of the hardest things that I learned how to do, and Al was very successful at it. I worked out on Mondays and Thursdays with the weights, and I threw loaded up with lactic acids on Tuesday, and on Wednesday I increased a lot more. So I basically lifted and then had training that was to emulate what I was going to do on the weekend, and then another day of training, and then the real thing on the weekend, rest on Sundays like all good Christian boys.
If you could change or tweak your best year ever, what would you change? What would you tweak? Moose, we'll start with you.
I wouldn't change a thing. I'd head it over.
I never had my best year. My best year would have been 76. But I only had 3 meets, and then the ITA, the first professional, went defunct. But I had 3 meets. In my 3rd meet, I had a foul at 76-1 and 78-11. I would have liked to have finished that year so that I could have been more familiar with my meet scenario, and the record might be out there a little bit farther.
Well, I don't know that I would have changed much about my best year, which was not my world record throw year, 73. It was actually the year 1974, where, for instance, in 29 competitions in Europe in 82 days, I averaged nearly 69, just about 69 feet per meet. And I wouldn't change anything just because it was so much fun to just compete at that high level and just keep it going. But I just want to make a side comment on something I would change, and I heard it from Reese Hoffa this morning, that the one thing I wish I had done before Montreal, for instance, is to train in a way that you don't warm up, but you learn how to throw far under those very strict conditions of the Olympic Games, which we never compete like that anywhere else. And I think I was smart enough to know that, and I didn't do it. And so I was used to going to meets and getting fully warmed up, taking 8 or 10 warm-ups, and being fully warmed up. And that's not the way it is in the Olympic Games. It's very sterile, and I wish I had trained under those conditions. Sorry to diverge from your question. What would you change about your best year?
I don't really think I would change any or too much of anything, if anything. I would probably say my best year was 95, and I think because I had such a success, I competed a lot in Europe, and my level of throwing was really high, and I don't think I would change anything about it.
I guess this year was my best year ever, since I'm so young in the sport, I guess, in a way. What would I have changed? I think when I started seeing hitches in my technique, especially when it started out at the Boston Indoor Games, I think me and Don, I wish we would have just changed whatever the technical flaw was and took a hit in the meets, so that later on in the year I could be more consistent, and hopefully when I got to like Madrid, where I eventually made the changes I needed to make, I could have done those earlier, and I think I would have thrown further and raised the average.
What is Reese doing to change his speed and quickness? maintain the speed and quickness, and also any running involved?
In terms of speed and quickness, I've always been naturally quick in the ring, so it's nothing that I'm doing particularly to maintain it. Whatever I do I've always been quick, and I do try to keep a mind's eye on it. I mean, I'm always asking Don, how's the speed in the ring? Does it look as fast as I normally would? And if he's like, okay, it's a little slow, what I try to change, I try to push harder out of the back, switch my feet faster, and just stay aggressive. In terms of running and conditioning that I do during the year, I'm very slow about getting into it, but we do short sprints, 20s, 30s, stair sprints. First 10 steps, go as fast as you possibly can, moving your feet as fast as possible, and we do timed 100s. Try to do a 100-yard sprint in 15 seconds. You do it 6 times, and then we do like a stride later on during that week too.
Brian, I have a question for you. Yeah, wake up. We're talking about speed and running speed here for a second. You had a relatively famous match race? Yeah, you did. I'm trying to remember who you ran. Right now it escapes me.
Girls, guys.
Girls. Who'd you run?
Barbara Farrell, Wyoming Tires, Lacey O'Neill.
I'm blanking out now. But how important was speed in your technique, as far as being a sprinter goes?
The first 3 steps are running steps. I had a torn cartilage in '74. I didn't win any meets, but I was like doing standing starts with the sprinters Warren Edmondson. These guys are doing 9-1 sprints. And my first 3 steps were quicker and more. I got out faster than they did from a standing start while they were wasting all their time standing. Of course, I came back to them about 20 yards, but the first 3 steps are running steps. That's when I talked about the quadricep and pulling yourself forward with the hamstring off the quad, similar to a running step or running off the toe board for a long jump. And then you have to, these vowels are killing me. You have to be able to use that speed, and the running gives you more activity, more fire, more oxygen for that burst of energy when you burn those calories. You get more out of one gulp of air if you're a good runner. I saw Reese today, and I realized how great a shape he is. He must have put in 2 miles walking back and forth there. But he wasn't breathing hard at all. I went, well, I'd have been on the floor having a heart attack.
Besides the obvious money differences, what difference would you like to see on the U.S. side? Compare the European circuit with the U.S. circuit, or how it was. This is a good comparison too, not only for Reese, who's in it, but I know, Al, you and I had talked about that a little bit earlier. Go ahead.
Okay. What I would love to see is more big money meets in the U.S. The meets that I make the least amount of money are in the U.S. It may be that they'd rather put more money in the sprints. Just, I guess, for an example, like a guy that's not even a sprinter, just the simple fact he's a 100-meter runner, like Dwight Phillips, who's a long jumper, he'll make $6,000 just to come up to a meet, just to do like a 60-meter sprint, and I'll be lucky if I make 4. Of course, it's changing, but if I go to Europe, I'm almost guaranteed $8,000 to $10,000 just to go to that meet. In the U.S., they may make 5, and then there might be like $3,000 for the win instead of $10,000 for a win in Europe. And this is almost universal. I mean, for the most part, like in the U.S., you might make $7,000 for grand total parents' fee prize if you win a meet. You go to Europe, I'm looking at $15,000 to win a meet, if not more. And I would love to see that kind of money put into the throws in the U.S. Instead of going to Melrose Games, which is pretty much the top paying meet in the U.S. That's why it's the one meet I try to do well in, because it pays the most. You win like $8,000 if you win that meet, in comparison to like 6 or 5 for winning like a Boston Indoor Games. So that's why, I'm putting more and more European meets in there. If I go to Germany, they'll pay me $10,000 to go do that meet. If I go to Spain, they'll pay me $8,000 to $9,000. If I go to London, they'll pay me $13,000 to $14,000 for that meet. So, if you could put those kind of numbers in the U.S. As Americans, especially, and have as many meets as they have in Europe, then of course, I'd love to stay here and make that kind of money here. But they for some reason they don't see us as that valuable of athletes in the U.S. as they do in Europe. In Europe, they just go absolutely crazy for track and field. They're like, anything we can do to get you here, the sky is the limit. I mean, I hit an all-time high where I went to Senegal, and they paid me $12,000 just to go to that meet. And that was just an appearance fee, not even including the prize money for that meet. And I couldn't imagine a U.S. meet if they ever paid us that kind of money. But you hear about, some of the athletes getting $25,000, $30,000 for a distance runner that isn't going to get a medal, won't even see the close to a medal, or a guy that's, think about like an Alan Webb who's never seen a medal, never going to win a medal, but they're going to pay that guy, $125,000 to do a meet. So it's crazy. But if they would do that for the throws here in the U.S., we would definitely stay here a lot more and probably do a lot better in European meets. With that said, we don't win major championships in the U.S. So even if they were paying us that kind of money, I would do a balance between it, because the money, the major meets, you're going to be an Olympic world champion, which is ultimately what everyone cares about, or in Europe. So I'd also do a tour where I do 4 or 5 meets in Europe, even if they were paying that kind of money in the U.S., because they don't have the Olympic Games in the U.S. They don't have the World Championships in the U.S. They don't have the World Athletic Final in the U.S. They're all going to be in Europe. So I better be able to figure out a way to throw my best in Europe. That's why my average in Europe is so high in comparison to the U.S. I throw a lot better in Europe than I ever would in the U.S. because they don't pay me to throw far in the U.S. They pay me to throw far in Europe.
Remember your question was you went up. But pretty much like Reese, I would like to see more opportunities for meets in the U.S., especially for the women. Women have such a hard time finding competitions, women throwers, and they have a hard time getting to Europe, and they have a hard time getting into meets even in the U.S. So that's what I'd like to see more of.
I don't even know what Reese was talking about. Money for money for money for throwing. I wrote some words to a song once. I've been working for a while on Easy Street, but money can't help me throw 70 feet. And so I'm not so sure that you could have paid me $1 million and I could have trained any harder than I already trained. And believe me, I have nothing against money. If somebody wanted to give me money, even back then, I would take it. But I don't think it. I work next to these NFL guys nowadays and Major League Baseball players and their millions, and I don't feel an iota of jealousy or dismay that there was, we made a little bit of money. I call it, a couple $100 a meet. It's like being a starving artist. You pursue your passion with just enough money to survive and pursue your passion, and that's really what mattered to me, and I have no regrets about that. But I can't obviously comment about these huge figures you're talking about.
In my time, unless you were born rich, you were out of luck. The AAU was run primarily off the East Coast, and the New York people controlled everything. They thought that $5 a day incidental expense was big money.
5, we only got 3.
Well, that was your personality. That wasn't the going game. And as far as competing overseas, those tours were funneled down through New York. Unless you were on the elite list, you didn't make the tours. And the only time Avery Brundage ever talked to me nice was when he wanted me to come back and throw in the indoor nationals because I'd won the Olympic Games.
Well, I have to quote Al about the monies that we made. I think he called it ample per diem. Yeah. Because but with the AAU, when we were doing that, and I came along to ride a little after Moose here, they give you like $2 a day. That's like, you can get a postcard, but you gotta like win at cards or something to get the stamp if you wanted to send something back. And then they raised it to $3 a day. Then you could buy the stamp and the postcard. But there was never a lot of money until like into the 80s and stuff like that. But I'm like Al, I didn't need to throw for, I went out and threw in rain, shit or shine. I just like throwing to improve and to saw people off who made more money than me. But Reese, that money that you get sounds like an enormous amount to me. But I got one of those, I'm over 50, I got that ARP thing, they give you that free calculator. The A-Rod thing with 350 million. My calculator don't even go to 350 million. What the hell?
I can probably give you another perspective on this. The Olympic Committee reported their expenses for 1948. This is for all teams, winter and summer and yachting and track and everything. They spent $460,000. All of that was contributions and remained that way until they got to Los Angeles. And the gentleman down there thought about corporate financing, and from then on why the Olympic Games are often running with money. There's a Los Angeles Foundation down there that is still working on the money left over from the Los Angeles city, and from the games, and I think they've got $150,000 or $150 million in their fund down there.
Minister, your wife told me that your biggest endorsement offer after winning the gold medal in 1948 was $450? Or somewhere around there?
A lot of money back then.
That's true, and this is going to disappoint Furback, but it was from Chesterfield Cigarettes, and I turned it down. But I do have something common with Al, unfortunately. I was smoking a cigarette when I walked to school, first day in high school.
I'm Brian, that's Al. Elton smokes stuff with cigarette filters and stuff.
Reese, you have something else you want to add there?
What does that mean? I don't even know what that means. That was just another stream of consciousness from Brian Oldfield.
But I guess I don't want to give the wrong perception that it's all about the money in some way. I mean, it is, and I know he's saying, I did it for the love of the sport, but in my perspective of it is, my perspective to it is, I'm dedicating, a lot of years of my life to throwing the shot put. And this is just an epiphany on my own part. Realistically, if I want to get anything out of the sport, I better get it while I can. And ultimately what it does is it increases performance. Because if I want to reach the top in terms of dollars, I have to be very, very good. So I look at it in that perspective. And when I was talking about things are changing, that is my motivator. That's probably one reason why I didn't change at that particular time, is because I was throwing far enough to get the good money. So why change it? Why risk doing that? Because I know that if I, in a way, am not in the position I'm in, like if you basically have to be the top 3 or 4 in the world to get anything out of being an American shot putter. Now, it's not European, but as an American, if you're not in the top 3 or 4, like if you're in the position like a Dan Taylor, who's that number 4 guy, it's really hard. So I don't want to. I'm incredibly amazed that they can make it and have that dedication, but for myself, I have to get something out of it. I can't dedicate 15 years or whatever amount of years of my life to throwing a shot put, and then when I'm done, have nothing to show for it. So ultimately, I want to win medals. I want to be a gold medalist. I want to be a world champion. I mean, I want to be that great guy. I want to have that average, but my average and everything that I do is motivated to make something out of this, so that when I finally can retire from the sport, that I have great accomplishments because I'm very successful at what I do, but I can also do something for the future. I mean, that's the great thing with football and all that, is they make millions of dollars for doing such a rudimentary thing. I mean, I'm waiting for the rug to be pulled out from me, and people are like, all he does is throw a steel ball. Why in the world are we paying him this much money? but I'm going to try to get it while the getting is good, because by 2012, when I might retire, I'd like to say, you know what, I threw really far, I did some great things, but also I made a little bit of money for myself for my future, and I could retire on something instead of at 35 years old starting at a bottom level job making $35,000 a year and then starting my life at that point. That's why when I'm saying, you know, I want more money in the U.S. so I can stay here, so I can increase my performance, so that when I get to a major championship, I can go there and win those major championships like I have. It's not necessarily what, all I want is money, just give me money, money. In a way it is, but also, I mean, I still want to go out there and I want to perform at the high level. Ultimately, my dream is to be able to break a world record indoors and out. And I think that's hopefully in my future, but I got to kind of do it smart.
Another question. Okay. Harold's question, do you think that there's feasibility in having just a throws-centric competition, maybe 3 or 4 of them, where we could get sponsorship and have it just be around, you know, just centered around those 4 events? Is it doable?
I think it's definitely doable, but what I would urge is making sure those opportunities aren't just limited to the top. I think that's also another kind of a problem we're having is the big wigs of me, Adam, John, we make all the money. And that's not benefiting the sport. As much as I say, give me money, 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 I need more people to come up behind me and throw really, really far, because it's going to push us and it's going to push the sport even further. So I would love to see the Noah Bryants, the Sheldon Battles, you know, those kind of athletes, you know, at all the Golden Spike Tour events, because how are they ever going to know how to throw far when the pressure's on them if they have to go and compete against college kids all the time? So if you put together something like that, you know, have the top 10 American shot putters or whatever way you want to do it at that event, and I think definitely you could see some great improvements in performance. So yeah, bring it on.
I don't know where Hal was coming from as far as who's going to back this, but I don't think it probably could include college throwers, because I don't think they could probably fit under that type of a deal. So.
I would love to see Hal's question. I mean, why not try it? And obviously, you'd have to be pretty aggressive to go out and get sponsorships. And also, you know, I personally wouldn't be opposed to even Highland Games events being involved if it increases the general appeal to more people.
Well, the only comment that I would make is that it is possible. You know, they do it in pole vault. They have just a pole vault competition, and they get a lot of people to come and do it. I think, you know, it's like build it and they will come. If you get somebody to back it and somebody to support it, I think that it could be a really good thing. But the comment about the college kids is true. They couldn't be involved in it because most of them wouldn't do it simply because they couldn't qualify for a nationals out of an event like that.
How would something like this, where there were concentrated competitions, were just those 4 events, how would that help women throwers? Or would it help women throwers?
Sure, because it would give them more opportunity to compete and to compete against one another or people at that level all the time.
And would visibility obviously be a part of it too?
Absolutely.
I mean, because we have some, you know, we've got some outstanding, you know, women athletes out there that we just don't see enough of.
The way that the IAAF has everything set up is basically the shot putters have to get in a minimum of 4 events, Grand Prix-wise, to qualify for the World Athletic Final. There's only one free bid into it, and for me, I always try to attempt to always go to these Grand Prix meets, you know, in a way to make sure that I'm not doing kind of like Adam. I mean, Adam, the way he does it is his way, but for me, I always want to go to as many Grand Prix meets as possible. To answer your question, though, is it would have to, to balance that with World Championships, if, let's say, there were 4 Grand Prix 1 meets that are offered in Europe, and as long as those Grand Prix meets are to the middle to the beginning of July, we would do those meets, and then the last 2 weeks leading up to like a major championship in August, if you had the competitions at that time, then we would come. You look at the that PAA meet in Oregon, they had that meet in August, and pretty much all the top throwers came to it because we needed something to do. It's not conflicting with the European season. We got everything we wanted in there, and we all competed well. We're all searching for something, a good meet at that particular time. But when they had the kind of the PAA in the end of May, you barely got any of the good guys to go because there are meets that pay more, and it sucks for the PAA and for meets like that in the U.S. But we, in essence, as long as if you made that meet like a Grand Prix 1 meet, you would get every single American thrower there. Not only shot putters, but everybody. I mean, there is a lacking in women's events and the hammers, even for men's, hammer, javelin, even a little bit more events in discus because they have more great discus throwers in Europe. But if you had something, let's say, the 2 weeks in a row, end of August, and they're within the U.S., I would definitely go to that. I would rather do something in the U.S. than have to stay in Europe for any longer than I have to. That's just, there's nothing in the U.S. at that time. If there was something at the end of, let's say, the last 2 weeks of July, I would do maybe one meet in Europe, and then I would do those last 2 meets in the U.S. Because I get to stay home, I get to train at home, I know the food's going to be good, and the money may not even have to be all that good to keep us here. It was just a question of, as long as we hit our minimum of 4 meets, most of the time there's nothing else really to do in the U.S., so we were going to stay in Europe and just make more money there. If there was a meet there that was paying whatever, we would stay in the U.S. and we'd do those meets at that time. But you run into a lot of problem with USA Track and Field because they hate doing that to the meets in Europe. They get mad at you, and then you probably run into problems.
So how does Reese Hoffa market Reese Hoffa? And are you the man in the shot right now?
Am I the man in the shot? Probably not. I never see myself as the man because in the way I'm settling on, I'm the greatest ever kind of deal. I see myself as always having to prove myself as a shot putter. I see myself as somebody that I have to prove myself throw after throw after throw because what I've seen over the years is everyone sees like a Christian Cantwell, a John Godina, these 6'5", just really strong guys as the man. And for me, that's my frustration and the thing that motivates me to always go out there and keep my standards really high in terms of marketing. I market myself by the way I throw. Because in some ways, it's like I'm a novelty act out there at 5'11", throwing 70 feet because there just aren't very many of us at 5'11" throwing 70 feet. And that's how I market myself. And other things, I guess, to market myself is whenever an opportunity comes my way a little bit, I try to jump on it as much as possible. That's why I made my way out to NBC, and they asked, like, hey, you're one of the guys, and I'm talking to other shot putters, like, we never had this opportunity to go out there and really be marketed and presented as an elite athlete for the throw, so I'm jumping on it. Something from Johnson & Johnson came up. I'm jumping on it. Anything to get my face out there, I'll do. But do I see myself as the face of the sport? Absolutely not. I see, like, John and Adam as more the face because those are the guys that have pretty much carried the sport to the point of where I'm at right now. I mean, without John Godina going out there and winning multiple world championships outdoors, without Adam Nelson being like the only guy to get a medal at some of the Olympics and finishing second in 2000 and finishing second again in 2004, that's what helped. That's the people that I see are really the face of the sport. They have all the credentials in the world, and me winning one, I guess 2 world championships or basically 1 world championship outdoor, in my eyes, does not make me the face of the sport. For me, I need to do this not only in 2007, but I got to do it all the way up to 2012. And then maybe at that point in 2012, then say, okay, maybe I could be, because maybe I earned the right to say that, but I can't say that. I just had great seasons. That's the way I look at it. I haven't done anything to really put myself on that pedestal yet.
If we could have one final thought from each of the 5 panelists, tell me, no, we'll start with you, Reese, because you have the mic. As far as throwing the shot goes, what's been so far, for you so far, for the rest, obviously looking back on careers, what's been that one moment if there has been that one moment. Could be a championship, could be a record, could be a training session. But what's been that one moment?
So what?
That makes it where that you can say, yeah, this is what it's worth. This is what it's all about. Has there been that one moment for you yet? Has it been a world championship? Has it been? What's it been?
I guess my one moment would have to be in Moscow, where I went out there and won, I guess, my first world championship. At that point, I felt like I was always in that shadow of every single person in front of me. And when I made that breakthrough of this guy that no one, in some ways I did the unknown thrower thing, finally it's like, oh, there's a number 3 guy, and it may not be Christian, it could be Reese. That was my moment.
I think my moment was probably in '96, and when I didn't have to leave the field after my 3 throws in the shot.
Beating Randy Matson indoors for the first time and setting a world indoor record was not my moment, but I did want to get that in. So the moment actually lasted about 3 weeks for me, and it was when I made my first U.S. national team in 1970. Unexpectedly, I threw 65 feet for 3rd place in Bakersfield, and Randy Matson declined the trip. He'd been on many before. And so I went, so a little boy from the Midwest was going to Paris, Stuttgart, and Leningrad, where I placed 4th, 3rd, and 2nd. I didn't win a single meet, but in those 3 weeks, I realized that I could beat these guys, and that all the things I'd been dreaming about, all of a sudden I realized were available and possible.
Well, I guess for me it would be probably in June of 1948 in a practice. And that was the first time that all the hard work I'd done on conditioning and in modifying my technique and in licking my inner self and really had my concentration under and a good throw in practice.
Then don't. I think my first moment was when I had that, like, the first opportunity to feel a throw and to have that throwgasm or whatever, and that was repeated time and time again. It's the same thing that brought us all here, that we've all felt, and all that other stuff is icing on the cake, but it was that initial rush when you found your event, when you found, this is what I want to do, that I feel good, it's me.
To kind of spread on. To kind of add on to that, I think one of the real good spots in coaching is when your athlete goes into competition and has a good throw, and that look of amazement comes over their face for the first time when they realize they have calmed themselves down, licked that inner thing, and had a good throw. And it was so easy, time slowed down, everything was smooth. When you see that on your athlete's face, you know they've stopped thinking and are just throwing.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our 5 panelists.